right, folks, pour that coffee and buckle up because we are in it. We are in the thick of it. The headlines are great this morning. So, we are going to be talking about something at the heart of society: kids, crime, and consequences. We're going to be talking a little bit about this bill that would let 12-year-olds off the hook. I mean, 12-year-old criminals just walk. And Pritzker's bill, his compassion bill, right, or the Democrats' compassion bill, Justin Slaughter introduced this. This is going to unleash chaos. So we're going to chat a little bit about that, but then we're also going to talk about Pritzker blocking this school choice lifeline that was in the Big Beautiful bill. So this is like a federal tax credit, but Pritzker is blocking that, and the Illinois Dems, of course, they want your kids trapped in these public schools to indoctrinate them. So we're going to get to that. Plus, Pritzker funding the CCP battery plant, and the plot thickens here because this is a national security nightmare, because now they're not just talking about making electric vehicle batteries, but they're potentially making batteries for data storage centers. So we're going to be talking about that. $536 million in tax credits at a state level went to Gotion, and then under the Biden administration, there was some federal tax credits as well. So we're going to get into all of it. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, share this out with your normie friends, get them to get to your level, okay? You got to get your friends to your level. You know a lot of content, you know a lot of news, and you're ahead of the news before anybody else if you're listening to this show. So you got to share this out with your normie friends and get them to see the truth. Get them to see what's going on in their state, in their communities, but also in their nation. So we are also going to get to a few other things this morning. I'm excited about this story. I talked about it yesterday a little bit. So more has come out, this marijuana farm where the kids, and I said I didn't have any evidence, so I did a deep dive yesterday on Twitter and found some more information about that marijuana farm. And turns out that, yes, it's looking more and more like migrant children were actually exploited at this pot farm, and they were owned and exploited. Their child labor, their labor was exploited, these children. And this Trump official is now out there sharing a very shocking update about these migrant kids. Excuse me, I've got like this weird cold that I haven't been able to shake. So these migrant kids, they were on this pot farm, and now this Trump official is coming out and talking about this update and gives us an update. And it turns out that this pot farm was actually owned by a Governor Gavin Newsom donor. So the president of this pot farm had donated $10,000 to Governor Gavin Newsom's campaign. I don't know. It looks really bad because it's like, did Gavin Newsom look the other way when children were working on this pot farm? And like I said, this is an industry reserved for 21-year-olds. Did he look the other way simply because he got this money? I'm just asking questions, okay? I'm just asking questions. So we're going to get to that here in the 7 o'clock hour. But first, let's talk about the 12-year-olds, the criminals, the teen takeovers. You guys know what's going on in Chicago. They're going to be able to walk because of this new bill. So Illinois politicians just advanced, grab a green crayon, write this down, Senate Bill 2418. This is a bill that would make it illegal to detain children under 13 years old, with some exceptions for violent crimes. So everybody's going to try to tell you, oh, this is compassion, this is fairness, this is all about trauma, and these kids grow up in these, they've got childhood trauma. Now, nobody's stepping back and asking the question that nobody seems to really care about in Springfield. Nobody asks this question: what happens when you remove consequences from crime, even if it is for kids? We're not talking about giving these kids a second chance. We're not raising these generation of kids to be upstanding citizens. No, if we remove the consequences of crime, even for children, what we're doing is we're making them hardened criminals, and we're not teaching them right from wrong. So let's talk about what the bill actually does. I'm going to walk you through Senate Bill 2418, sponsored by Representative Justin Slaughter, Democrat, Chicago, of course. He had a very controversial bill out there that eventually got watered down, where you couldn't like pull somebody over if they were speeding. It was a very controversial bill. It was like if they were speeding like under 20 miles per hour, like if it was like 19 miles per hour, if you were going 19 miles per hour over the speed limit, you wouldn't be able to pull that person over. That was a bill. It got watered down. But man, this guy, I don't know why. He is like the poster child in Springfield that introduced these really extreme bills that are pro-criminal. So then that's what this is. It's pro-criminal bill. Stops detention for 10 to 11-year-olds starting in 2026. And it expands to 12 years old. So it used to be where you could detain 10, 11, and 12. Or 10 and 11 and 12. But now it goes even further, and the bill says, okay, we can't detain anybody under 12. You can detain them when they're 13. But it used to be like you could detain them for 10, 11, 12, and it expands to 12-year-olds in 2027. Okay, so that's when this change happens. It's in 2027. So violent crimes like murder, aggravated assault, they're exempt. But everything else, these kids can't be detained. So it used to be where you could even detain a 10-year-old or an 11-year-old. Now, with no cash bail, and it's very rare where you have children who are being detained, okay? Supporters like Elizabeth Clark, and this is in the Center Square, of the Juvenile Justice Initiative says that this bill is going to stop early criminalization. So she says that putting kids in jail is traumatic and it leads to repeat offenses. So the logic is, let me help you, Justin Slaughter, Democrats, the people who believe that you can't detain children. And I'm going to get to why detaining children is, one, biblically acceptable. We should be training up our children, and there should be consequences to crime. And we're talking mob retail theft. We're talking teen takeovers in Chicago. And we really need these consequences for these kids. Hey, we're going to detain you. We're not going to like sentence you to a life sentence. Okay. We're not going to give you the needle for a mob takeover, retail theft. We're not going to give you the needle, but we are going to detain you, and we're going to contact your parents, possibly fine your parents for not enforcing that curfew. That would be something that I think would help Chicago and the teen takeovers that happen. There was a teen takeover that actually happened in Normal and resulted in the death of somebody. Okay, so these things can wind up deadly if they aren't stopped and if there aren't proper consequences. But the logic here of somebody like a Justin Slaughter is like this. Kids become criminals because the system is too mean to them. Okay, detaining them is too mean. And because they're broken, it's not because the broken homes or the absent fathers or the TikTok trends, which is really what's going on with a lot of these teenagers. There's TikTok trends, and they are inspiring them to commit theft in mobs, traffic drugs in schools. But nobody wants to blame gang culture, absent fathers, broken homes, same-sex couples. I'm sorry, but the statistics are there. Same-sex couples, it always results in kids acting out, either sexually or violently. The statistics are there. So that's why the Republican platform is very clear that, hey, we are, although it is not universally achievable, we believe that a two-parent household, mother and father, is the best way to train up a child. Okay, that is the best way for a child to be at his or her best. Okay, is if there's a two-parent household and if those parents are the child's mother and the child's father. Okay, so that's just statistical. That's why Republicans have that in their platform. It's just statistical fact that children do better in those homes. Okay, so they don't want you to look at that stuff. They don't want you to look at the absent fathers, the terrible schools, the TikTok inspired mobs. If there were two parents in the household, you could put parental controls on your TikTok. This is all kinds of things that lead to teen crime. But they think that teen crime is because the system is too mean to them, and then they wind up being habitual criminals after they've been detained. I don't know about that. That's a little bit of a stretch there. They committed the crime. They were detained. Most likely, they're going to commit more crimes if they don't have swift, quick consequences from their parents and from law enforcement. So, and it starts in the home, because if you don't train your child up, if you don't punish your child or discipline your child and provide consequences, the law enforcement is going to have to do it. So it all starts in the home. But let's pause right here. Look at the word of God. Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. Okay, so that's what Proverbs 22 tells us. God's model is very clear. The Bible's very clear on this. Kids need training. They need discipline. They need structure. They don't need coddling, confusion, or excuses. This is not about compassion. This is neglecting our children by not providing them swift consequences and discipline. And in Romans 13, it's very clear. Scripture states that the government is in the business of punishing wrongdoing, rewarding good, punishing evil. That applies to adults, yes, but it also applies to children who are running wild. And the left wants you to see juvenile crime as a public health issue. It's a moral issue. Okay. And when we abandon justice in the name of trauma prevention, we create a society where crime is normalized and repentance becomes impossible. Okay. Because if you're never called out on your nonsense, you're never going to repent from that thing. Okay. So the kids need to be called out on their nonsense. They need to be detained. If I had gotten into trouble, and I didn't, I was a really good kid. I had great parents, disciplined me at home. So law enforcement didn't have to discipline me. But I can guarantee you, if I had gone out, underage drank, or participated in retail theft, my mom and dad would have allowed the law enforcement to throw me into the back of the cop car and go to jail, because those are consequences to crime. I'm fortunate where I had parents who performed discipline action in the home, so no other adult had to discipline me because I had the fear of God. I would never even think about committing a crime, because what law enforcement would do to me would be nothing compared to what my dad and my mom would do if I had gone out and committed crimes, stole things, drank, drug deals, anything like that. So now you might be thinking, what kind of crimes are 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds really committing, Kat? Are you being ridiculous? No, let me tell you this, far more than you would believe, especially in Chicago. There is a lot of mob retail thefts going on. And like I said, that's a TikTok thing. There's a TikTok trend on how to steal Kias. And I've come across this. It's shocking how many 10, 12-year-olds are doing carjackings. Now, this is a violent crime, okay? Carjackings in Chicago committed by kids under 13 is up. Weapon possession, gang initiation, drug transportation. And now what they're doing, the drug traffickers, they're realizing, hey, in the state of Illinois and in Chicago, we could give the drugs to the juveniles. They're untouchable by the cops because they won't be detained. They'll just be right back on the streets. And we've got an endless supply of drug mules to run our drugs for us in the public schools. So that's what's going on. And you can thank decades of juvenile justice reform for that, because they've been doing juvenile justice reform. I think at age 18, you can find. So Governor J.B. Pritzker, it was this nasty case where he pardoned somebody for after he had served significant amount of time. And this guy, I forget the guy's name. I'll have to look that up in the break. But JB pardoned somebody who was a very, very violent criminal. And he was convicted when I think he was 17 years old. He wasn't 18 quite yet. But it was a he posed as like a maintenance guy to go fix a ceiling fan for somebody, and then burned everybody alive in this apartment and like tortured them and beat them to death, and like beat them so bad and had them sitting in a bed. I remember the police report because I was so interested in this, and Governor J.B. Pritzker's pardon of this person. This was a very violent person. Now, he served his time, a significant amount of time, but he was sentenced to life. Okay, but he was pardoned and he didn't have to serve life because of Governor J.B. Pritzker. And he did this because there's this new law out there in Illinois where you're 18 years old. If you're younger than 18, like 17, 16, if you're younger than 18, you don't have to serve a life sentence. You can't be given a life sentence at that age, which is just ridiculous because this individual is 17 years old, went in, beat somebody so bad. This person was like laying in the bed, and like this person was, the criminal had this person get up and like go and get the jewelry for him and everything and beat him. So it was just such a terrible, I can't even believe, like it puts my stomach in knots thinking that Governor J.B. Pritzker pardoned this individual. And not to mention this individual wound up like on some sort of board, like criminal justice reform board. And it just makes me sick to my stomach thinking that our governor did that. And then on top of that, changed the law to where you can't give a life sentence to a 17-year-old. Like, come on. If you are like Jeffrey Dahmer type, and this is like when I was reading this police report of what this guy did to these people, or to this person in this apartment, I was like, this is Jeffrey Dahmer type stuff. Like, this guy should have served a life sentence, and I don't know, he's pardoned. So with SB 2418, that's what we're talking about today. You're essentially telling cartels, gang leaders, hey, use 12-year-olds, okay, because they're untouchable until high school. I mean, essentially, use 12-year-olds, use 13-year-olds. And that's what they're already doing, the cartels, the gang members. So let's be fair. Juvenile detention in Illinois is a complete disaster. I will say that. According to reports, 3 out of 14 centers meet the minimum safety standards. They're facing class action lawsuits, 2 of these 14 centers, these juvenile detention centers, because they're not serving in like federal prison. They'll go to a juvenile detention center until they're 18. But 2 of them are facing class action suits. And Clark says the kids cry all night, and it destroys their education. Okay, then they can't go out and get an education. And yes, it's heartbreaking, but whose fault is that? It's the government's fault. We need to reform the place where the kids go to serve out their sentence, or to have like consequence. Like, discipline doesn't have to be like awful. You know, the kids shouldn't be crying. They should be getting some sort of, if they're serving time from 12 to 18 years old, if they're serving that amount of time, then they should be getting some sort of education and reform. And you know, this is the government's fault. This is the same bloated state that can't fix DCFS, can't balance a budget. They can't keep potholes filled, okay? And you want them to fix child reform through a task force, because that's also what this bill does. It creates a child first reform task force. That's going to do absolutely nothing. They're going to study, they're going to recommend, they're going to delay, deflect, spend money, and nothing changes, okay? So they're going to create a task force to try to combat some of the disasters that are going on in these juvenile detention facilities. But it's like, folks, this is not going to help. Another task force is not going to help. I'll tell you what will actually help. You get people in there. You stop demonizing law enforcement, first of all. You make this a profession that people actually want to go into and are proud to be a part of. Number one, we stop demonizing our correctional officers and our criminal justice system. Okay. With bills like this, it's essentially demonizing our criminal justice system. Let's fix our criminal justice system and our juvenile detention centers and get upstanding men and women in there to work with these kids, with these teens. And then we need to allocate funding to this thing. I've told you several times, there's so many pet projects out there that we're spending money on that doesn't make any sense. NASCAR, Chris Welch's sports complex, $40 million, NASCAR, $5 million. The list could go on and on and on. $63 million to illegal immigrants, legal aid, and a lot of these nonprofits, the pro-Palestinian nonprofits, there's millions of dollars allocated to that. Boys and Girls Club, like, I'm not against some of these nonprofits, but it's like, hold on, wait a second. We should be providing at least the minimum safety standards for these kids who are facing their consequences and serving out a sentence. Okay, we should be providing basic safety, maybe basic education, and reforming them in our detention centers or juvenile detention centers. So the kids are suffering either in failed detention centers or they're out on the street getting worse. Okay, so this is our options right now. We've got two options: option A, option B. Option A is we have the kids serve out or have consequences for these kids, which we do need, but they're suffering in these detention centers, these failing detention centers. And then option B would be just to leave them out on the street and then they get worse. Like, those are our options right now here in the state of Illinois. So our teens are doomed. So they're not exactly wrong. The teens are doomed. We definitely need reform in our juvenile detention centers. But Governor J.B. Pritzker, this is the same guy who signed laws to abolish cash bail, backed policies to turn Cook County really into a jail-free or get out of jail-free zone. That's what Cook County is. Under his watch, DCFS has had dozens of kids stuck in psych wards. They can't even place these kids psych wards in hospitals because the system can't find foster replacements because they treat foster parents like crap, by the way. So DCFS, they've got dozens of kids that they can't place, and they're stuck in hospitals or psych wards because the system can't find foster replacements. So now we're supposed to trust that his allies in the legislature, the legislators here who are creating this task force through this bill, that they're going to be able to fix the detention, the juvenile detention centers through this task force. I doubt it. Pritzker, he loves to pose as a protector of children, unless those children are of course, in the womb, or if they're from broken homes or suffering because of government failure. He says, oh, I'm a protector of kids. I love the kids, pre-K through, we should have more pre-K centers or whatever. He talks about how much he loves the kids, of course, unless they're in the womb or if they're from broken homes. These kids have been neglected in these juvenile detention centers, and these centers should be better. We shouldn't just do away with consequences just because the juvenile detention centers suck. That's government's fault. Government needs to be held accountable. So what does reform really look like? Let's be clear. It's not locking up kids and throwing away the key. I am not for that. I don't think anybody's really for that. That's why they serve in juvenile detention centers, not prison. Okay, not your average, like your regular prison. They go somewhere separately and they serve their time separately. I'm not about locking kids up, and usually they serve until they're 18. Okay, and then they get out. But let's not, and that's usually like a violent crime. Okay, like 12 to 18, it'll be a violent crime. Maybe you go for 16 months if you're committing retail theft, organized retail theft, or carjackings. It might be 12 to 16, you serve 4 years. Let's not pretend that criminal behavior at 11 years old is just a phase. It's not just a phase. Okay. We can't be pretending that. And I'm also not saying that we should I'm also not saying that the kids should be locked up and the key thrown away. Yes. Like, we should reform our children and not lock them up the same way we do with adults. And we don't do that. Such a thing as juvenile detention center. So it's already watered down for children. Okay, so family first intervention. Here's what we need. Family first. Rebuild the family. Like I said, father's back in the home, mother and father in the home. Kids just do better with a heterosexual couple in the home. And we need to support church-based mentoring and counseling. So local accountability instead of centralizing power to Springfield and then just creating a sweeping bill that says, oh, we're not going to detain 10-year-olds, 11 or 12-year-olds anymore. What we really need to do is come up with like county-based juvenile review boards, okay, where you have maybe like a board made up of county board members, and community leaders, not bureaucrats, church leaders, perhaps even. And they look at these cases individually and decide, okay, yes, this is a proper sentencing. We're reviewing the sentencing of these children, maybe something like that, something more localized. Okay. And they can make the decision, hey, yeah, let's lock up this 12-year-old. Let's lock up this 10-year-old at a local level. Let's just not create sweeping statewide legislation over this. Okay. So we need more faith-based rehab services and alternatives. So churches, they really need to take the lead on this. And, if it wasn't for our crappy government leaders, a lot of them won't even touch churches, okay, as a solution. A lot of these government leaders will go to the nonprofit organizations like Boys and Girls Club or like Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. I don't know. There's a billion of them. Those are all fine, but they're not actually, there's no true value, like true actual values in these nonprofit organizations, because in churches, where do we get the truth? Where do we get the values from? A single book, okay, a single doctrine. And if we were to let the churches take the lead on early intervention programs, rather than nonprofit organizations, or, these state-funded trauma workshops, you'll get a lot of that, like DCFS state-funded, there's like a program within DCFS. It's an early intervention program. A lot of these a lot of these politicians at a community level, local level, they won't touch churches with the 10-foot pole, because separation of church and state, and they scream about that, which is not actually separation of church and state. It was Thomas Jefferson, folks. I mean, these people, the founding fathers, had worship service, when they were passing legislation and praying "In God We Trust." That's still there in Congress. There's a big old display. It says "In God We Trust." It was more about keeping the government out of churches. It's not about keeping the church out of government. So we really need more churches involved, and politicians shouldn't fear involving our churches to create these early intervention programs. And consequences, we need them. We need immediate, fair, and redemptive. Okay. So what I mean by that is not just like throw the book at it, throw them away and jail them and throw away the key and torture these children in these juvenile detention centers, or make them cry. I'm not saying that. We need true redemption and repentance going on in these juvenile detention centers. And these kids need discipline and structure, not excuses. So let me give you a warning. What's going to happen if Senate Bill 2418 gets passed? Well, Illinois, if they go down this road, you're going to see more carjackings. You're going to see more school lockdowns. You're going to see more victims. Why? Because there's no fear of consequences. And, once these kids grow up, and they grow up without any kind of correction or intervention or consequences, many of them aren't going to age out of crime. Okay, that's just not something that happens. It's not just a phase. Okay, this is like coming from somebody who has never really committed a crime ever. I mean, the chemistry of your brain has got to be completely off kilter here, or something. There's something seriously wrong with a child who holds up somebody and carjacks somebody. Okay, and that child, it's not just a phase. That child is going to never age out of the crime. There's something seriously wrong with the kid, and we need to have immediate consequences. And prisons, they will eventually graduate, and then they'll go to prison. Okay, they'll graduate out of their kid crime, and then they'll graduate into adult criminality. And prisons are filled with people who started out young, by the way, and they're filled with people who started out young, and nobody ever stopped them. So we need to make sure we stop the kids from graduating into adult criminality. Friends, we serve a God of truth and grace, but we also serve a God of order. Chaos isn't compassionate. Lawlessness isn't mercy. Jesus told the woman caught in adultery, neither do I condemn you. But he also said, go and sin no more. That's justice with redemption. We have to require these children to repent. And part of that is involving the churches more and not these nonprofit organizations who have no true tenant, no true grounding. Christianity is grounded in the Bible. Okay, so there is a doctrine that you can follow and it's organized. It's been around forever. Okay, Christianity practically forever. So that's the way we got to go. So our children need that. Lawmakers in Springfield, they're returning in October. So we'll have to see what happens to this bill. Flood their inboxes, folks. Visit them at their offices. Take a ride down to Springfield when they're in session. And, don't let them dismantle the justice system. That's what they're trying to do with this bill. They're dismantling the justice system and they're demonizing the justice system rather than reforming it. All right, Patriots, I want to chat a little bit about the child tax credit. And I'm going to paint a picture for you. Let's get to some of your chats here on the other side. Smash that like button. I'm going to take a quick break. But when we come back, we're going to get to the child tax credit because Donald Trump has a federal tax credit. It's a school choice tax credit, really. And Governor J.B. Pritzker is putting a stop to it. So I'll be right back. Smash that like button. Go ahead and smash that like button. I appreciate you being here. Yes, Charlie, I promise we are going to do it this Saturday. I'm going to host a call-in and you guys can call in and we can chat. I'll provide you more details tomorrow in tomorrow's show on how we're going to do that and facilitate that. So I appreciate you being here and I'd love for you to call in now. I've got to figure it out on my end. I'm a new podcaster. So if you guys want to support, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Let's get to some of your comments. I love this one, honey. Good morning. I appreciate you being here. A lot of parents don't seem to care what their kids are into either. And now it's even worse with all this transgender crap and their sex changes. You can't expect children to raise themselves. Yes, exactly. And we are going to get into that. That actually ties into this story. You can't expect children to raise themselves. And you have to be involved in a lot of what, and I know this might be controversial. So you guys are going to be mad at me, but a lot of what's going on in American culture today when it comes to raising children, they're gone for 8 hours a day. Okay, so you don't know your children. Max, you might know them or you might get like a couple of hours with them. But here's something that's been going on, and I'd say it's been a trend more so in the last 10 years. Travel ball, sports, and I'm not against sports. I was in all the sports, okay? Volleyball, basketball, softball, you name it, okay? And this was just the American culture that we've kind of always had sports, but it's gotten almost obsessive. So, it's really sad when our churches are empty, the pews are empty, and then our sports complexes and our, arenas are packed shoulder to shoulder. So we've kind of gotten obsessive in America about sports. So there's no way for you to know what your kids are up to if you don't see them. Okay, or know them. So if you send your kid, so think about this. Let's really think about this. If you send your kid to school, most likely, if they don't have any extracurriculars before school starts, which a lot of kids do have extracurriculars before school starts, you'll send them to school. They get there, I don't know, 8 a.m., they're there from 8 to 3, and most likely they have chess club or something for a couple of hours, or they're going to soccer practice. So they might get like an hour break between the time school ends and when their practice starts. Okay. So that's enough time to like shove a sandwich down your throat and change, into your sports gear and go to practice. And then they're at practice, let's say from 4 to 6, 4 to 7. Okay. So they got to get up at 8 a.m. in the morning. You only see your kids maybe an hour, 2 hours. You get them like dinner. Okay. You don't know your kids, and even, Saturdays, weekends, you're so busy taking the kids to travel ball, or you're taking the kids to different, locations to get them to play sports. But that's not meaningful time, right? That's, you're focused on this thing. Hey, we got to get here. We got to do this. You got to make sure you eat here. And then, after this tournament, we got to drive here. Make sure you get your balls and your bats out of the bag. That's not meaningful time. That's not sitting around the dinner table, praying, talking about the word of God. That's not time with your children. So, parents, like you said, honey, they seem like they don't really care what's going on. I would take it even a step further. I'd say it's impossible to care what your kids are up to when you don't know them or see them. Like, for example, I see strangers in Walmart all the time, right? I wouldn't necessarily say I don't care about, like, at a human level, I care about people in general. I care that they're another human, but I don't care what they had for breakfast that day. I kind of walk by a lot of strangers, in Walmart, and I don't care, like, about their daily lives. And because they're a stranger, I don't know them. So your kids are strangers, essentially, because you're like, let's face it, you're seeing them an hour a day. Okay. Or a couple of hours a day. And I know that might be controversial, but we've kind of gotten obsessed in America. And I don't know if it's like a social media thing. You want people to see that your kid is winning. I don't know what exactly started it. All I know is that it's destroying families. Your travel ball, your obsession with getting kids in extracurriculars. And it's not only just, the parents who are obsessed with getting their kids into extracurriculars. It's coming from the school district. So, fun little fact, my school district, when I went to high school, they have a saying, and I got older and I realized, wow, this is really messed up. Bleed black and gold. Okay, that's our school colors. It was our school colors. I'm not against the high school I went to, but there was a very intense emphasis on getting involved. So I was like in every single club, every single sport, and there was an emphasis almost as if you had to, and you have to be a comet. You have to bleed black and gold and eat, sleep, breathe school. Okay. And when that kind of stuff happens, you're not building a relationship with your forever family. Okay. Your mom and dad are going to be with you in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s. Okay. Your siblings are going to be with you your entire life after the age of 18. And you didn't build up a relationship with those people. And then they wind up being strangers to you, and you have no relationship. And then you have to go about adult life all by yourself. So it's like we're setting people up for failure, and no wonder gang culture is so popular, nowadays. And no wonder these kids are going to TikTok and finding their virtual families and virtual communities. It's because they're lonely. They don't have relationships that they should have been building their entire childhood. They don't have their parental relationship there. The parental relationship isn't there. The sibling relationship isn't there. All right, let me get to this. Went off on a tangent there, but that's what this show is all about. Love your comments. Absolutely, God is good. More faith-based rehab. Yeah, we have a lot of, let's just say, cojones-less politicians, and they don't want faith. involved in government because of this whole separation of church and state. So that's why nonprofit organizations have how do I say it? They saw an opening, a lot of these nonprofit organizations, because it used to be where, oh yeah, the church will just call the pastor and the pastor will come in and talk to the kids, and we'll do these, faith-based early intervention programs. It used to be that way, where we would just involve the church so much into government. But now, with this whole separation of church and state thing, which really, really is kind of new. I think it started when we legalized gay marriage. That's when it really started a separation of church and state, and people really started beating you over the head with it. That's when that really started, I would say, is when we legalized gay marriage. But nonprofit sector saw an opening, and now we have all these nonprofit organizations, and their missions are loosely tied to like a mission statement, and like there's no real doctrine that you can follow. So we need to get back to faith-based. I appreciate you, Crystal. Crystal, let's talk about this child tax credit. Imagine a lifeboat is lowered into choppy waters. Okay, just close your eyes for me. Play along. There's choppy waters, okay? And a lifeboat is lowered down into these choppy waters, and the choppy waters of the American education system. A shining vessel paid for with private donations, completely voluntary and 100% legal, thanks to under the new federal tax credit, signed into law by none other than President Donald J. Trump. Now imagine Illinois parents trapped in these failing schools. They are in the choppy waters of these public education indoctrination centers, and they're crying out for help, and they want to climb aboard. They want to climb aboard this shiny vessel. And Governor J.B. Pritzker walks over, cuts the rope, and says, nope, you can't have that lifeboat. That's what just happened. So the Trump administration, they created a school choice tax credit program, okay, which allows a donor to get 100% of their money back, up to $1,700, when they give to scholarship programs that help kids escape failing schools. So public schools or help kids, get into these scholarship programs or give them scholarships. These private donations will get them out of the schools and get them into either a private setting, a charter type school, private Christian school, right? And that's what this tax credit program, this school choice tax credit program, allows for donors. So it's a win-win for everybody. It's a win for the students, it's a win for the families, and it's a win for freedom. But Pritzker says no. Why? Because it's politically inconvenient. So let's break this down. The federal program is part of the big, beautiful bill that Donald Trump signed. And this allows anyone to donate up to $1,700 in the school choice scholarship funds. And they receive 100% federal tax credit, up to $1,700 in return. So that means it costs you nothing to help families who are struggling to send their children to a better school. I mean, it's a win, 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 win. This is a great thing. And what makes this even better is the program is voluntary for states. Okay, so no mandates, no federal overreach. This is a voluntary scholarship program created by the federal government. This is not a mandate. You don't have to participate. And this is just an open door for kids who need to escape the trap of government-run schools and government-run education failures, okay? So Illinois State Senator Andrew Chesney, Center Square, says joining the program should be a no-brainer. But it's not, because JB and the left-wing power brokers hate school choice. They absolutely can't stand school choice. It's so funny. They're the pro-choice party, but not when it comes to where you want to send your kids to school. So let's not forget, and this ties right into what you were saying there, honey. Let's not forget, education is not the government's job. So I've taken a very intense position on this. I don't think that you should even be sending kids to private school. I don't think you should be sending kids to public school, because Deuteronomy 6:7 says this: you shall teach them diligently to your children. So that's not that's a command to parents. You have to teach them. So to me, The way I read Deuteronomy 6, it says, you got to homeschool your kids and you have to teach them. The public school model is very, very terrible for children, just socially as well, because you're surrounded around children all the same age, and that's not naturally occurring in real life. So, for example, if you are in a work setting, a corporation, if you work for a corporation like, say, State Farm, or if you go to even college, or if you work in a set, I worked, with, I've only worked with people who are older than me, much older than I am. And when you train children to interact with people of their own age, they don't know how to interact with anybody outside of that age. Like, it's very unnatural. There is no setting in life where you will be surrounded, other than public school, be surrounded by people of your exact same age. It's very, very unlikely. Like in the store, okay, Walmart, you're in Walmart, there's people of all races, people of all age groups. So it's very unnatural to have children be surrounded around children. So in your family unit, that's impossible. Like, they can be close in age, but impossible. Twins. Okay, I'm a twin. But in your family unit, you're going to have multiple children of different ages. And that's better for your social development, in that there's no other like scenario where you're like in a situation where you're around people all the same age. So God gave a command to parents, not to bureaucrats, not to Springfield, not to lobbyists in the Chicago Teachers Union offices. He gave you, the parent, a command to teach your children diligently. And I mean, Deuteronomy 6:7, you guys could go read it. It goes even further. It talks about how you have to be with them during the day. So, well, public school, that doesn't fit that model, right? You got to be with your children in order to teach them. So when parents are stripped of their right to choose, and I get it, it might not be universally achievable at this point in modern American society to have everybody homeschooling. I think that would be a huge help to our culture, but I get that that's not universally achievable, and it's probably not super realistic. Parents, they should have at least the option to send their kids either to government-run schools or to privately run institutions, okay? And when you strip parents of those right to choose where they want their kids to be educated, because like I said, God gives a command to parents to teach them. Now, if you choose to outsource that, I think it's unbiblical, but you got to get the kid, you got to have that choice. You got to be able to choose where your kids are educated. And if you don't get to choose, the public school is just going to indoctrinate the kids, okay? So the public schools are failing. They're underperforming. They're pushing gender confusion, critical race theory, godlessness. And yeah, just try opening up your Bible and reading to your peers right before class starts. You'll see how upset your teacher gets. If you're in public school, go ahead and whip out your Bible and start reading it for your classmates. And I guarantee you're going to be sent down to the principal's office faster than you can say Jesus. Okay, so President Donald Trump has essentially thrown parents a lifeline here, and the left is scrambling to keep them in chains, keep these parents in chains, and strip them of their right to choose where they want their kids to be educated. And it's tough. And there is such and one thing, I don't want to come off as like holier than thou, or like, but in American culture, you don't need the 2-car SUV thing. You don't need the granite countertops. You don't need all of that when it comes to raising up your children. Okay. You can cut down on your lifestyle a little bit so that way you can be with your children. And when you crunch the numbers, daycare, at least, daycare before they're of school age, and you can send them to the school for free taxpayer dollars. I mean, you're taxed into oblivion, your property taxes. If you just calculate your taxes, property taxes, if we didn't have public school at all, you'd be saving money and you'd be able to take that money and educate your children. But anyway, it's possible, okay, to homeschool your children. It is. And, the left is scrambling to keep you in chains, and they've always made it difficult for you to homeschool. So whether that's through the economy or through regulation, homeschool regulation. They make it difficult for you to do it. It's not easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it, right? The easy thing is to throw them in public school for 8 hours a day. That's the easy thing, and everybody does that. So the big lie about public school funding, I want to get to that because what's Governor J.B. Pritzker's excuse here about the tax credit and not allowing essentially parents to participate in this school choice tax credit program? His excuse, he says that the tax credit could reduce funding for public schools because fewer students would be enrolled. That's the same line that we've heard for 30 years, okay? Why they don't like private schools and things like that is because it would reduce the funding of public schools. Look, the student enrollment has been going down, especially after COVID-19, has been going down in these public schools, and they've been funded tenfold, okay, over and over. Like, it doesn't matter. The student enrollment doesn't matter. They get more and more funding every year, okay? So despite enrollment dropping, they get more dollars and pass more tax referendums and tax you on your the sales tax referendum, the 1% in McLean County. That was just on the ballot and you guys voted yes for it. So here's the truth. Public schools don't lose funding unless they lose students, and politicians choose not to reallocate that funding. So politicians will always choose to fund the system. Okay, so it doesn't matter if the students aren't enrolled in public school or if there's less. The politicians will never not choose to fund this system. So the schools are funded by property taxes, per pupil state funds. Okay, so they're very heavily funded, and if the student leaves, the money should follow them. Okay, so if that student leaves, the money should go follow them. That's fair. That's freedom. But in Illinois, the money never really belongs to the parents or the kids. It belongs to the system, and they will continue to get funded. And more, the property taxes are going to continue to go up because government is not in the business of giving themselves less money. And you'll have Republican, Democrat politicians tell you, oh, well, we did a property tax. We didn't vote to raise your property taxes. We kept the tax rate the same. Yeah, well, the assessed values go up, so you guys are getting way more money, right? Like, you guys are really insulting our intelligence. You should lower the tax rate. You'll never see a government entity do that. So a local government entity do that. They will just continue to keep that tax rate the same, or they'll raise the rate if they're really ballsy. But the money belongs to the system. So the system is never going to go not funded. Okay, because the politicians will always choose to fund that system. They'll never they'll never let the money follow the student. And who controls the system? Teachers' unions, who funnel their union dues right back into the campaign coffers. Some of these union dues are insane. I was talking to a teacher the other day, $40 a month. I was like, what the hell? That's ridiculous. Where all that money going? Oh, it's to pay the union leadership and the politicians. So these teachers union, like, I don't know. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. $40 a month? That's insanity. That's like my phone bill, essentially. So, I mean, that's a good chunk of money. Union do. Okay. So teachers union, bureaucrats, politicians, that's who controls the system. They're not protecting the schools. They're protecting their payroll. And let's be honest, Pritzker and his political allies, they don't care about funding. They really just care about control. The school choice is dangerous to them because if the parents can pull their kids out, they can pull away from, and if they pull away from government schools, they pull away from the indoctrination and from the propaganda of kids. And they can no longer teach your kids that America is evil, biology is bigotry, and that families are optional, and you don't have to have a family. You don't have to participate in your own family. That's what they're being taught in school. So school choice is liberty. School choice is self-governance, and the left can't have that. They don't want that. So instead of empowering parents, what Pritzker has done, he has stood in the way of that, empowering parents, and we are locking kids in to low-performing schools. And, meanwhile, I highly doubt, now I don't know Pritzker's personal life or his family or anything, but I highly doubt his kids didn't go to elite institutions. I know Teddy Pritzker definitely is a part of like the horse culture down in Florida, has a ton of, opportunities, and he funds all of those opportunities and allows her to do all these different things. Why are we not allowed to train our children up the way we want them to go and give them the opportunities that we want them to have? Okay, so it's because it's hypocrisy 101. Well, I like to say it's hierarchy, not hypocrisy. The rules are for thee, not for me. So Senator Chisney is right. It's not about these inner city schools either. School choice isn't just about Chicago. You might think, oh, my school district isn't bad, Kat. It's actually really not. Sure. Look up their test scores, because statewide, I'm telling you right now, the kids can't read and do math at grade level. In the south side of Chicago, of course, the kids are stuck in these gang-ridden districts, and they have significant dropout rates, higher dropout rates than graduation rates. And yes, that's happening in the south side of Chicago and in the inner city, but you've got these suburb schools like Naperville, liberal school boards who are pushing pornographic books and secret gender transitions and making your kids really, really weird. You've got it in rural towns. Hayworth, Illinois. The woman had to involuntarily resign because she was allowing kids to read, view a pornographic video. I mean, it was called Money Shot, and it's a documentary on Netflix. She instructed her children that, hey, the children in the classroom, hey, you guys can use this as a part of your reading assignment. What? So, I mean, even the rural towns, these small schools, they are force-feeding this progressive dogma to your children. So, and no one is safe. Okay, so you might think that your school district is awesome. It's not. So no one should be forced into a school that isn't working for them. School choice is a civil rights issue. The left... excuse me. Whew. Sneezed violently. The left, they used to say that it was civil rights. If you remember that this was the party of school choice, this is the party of civil rights. They used to say that until they realized that their pals were no longer getting their paychecks and their pensions. And then they abandoned school choice. All right, I got to take a quick break, but you're listening to Conservative Cat. I will be right back. Hey, good morning. I appreciate you being here. Thanks for sticking around. Subscribe. Go ahead and share this video out with your friends. We are going to get to a few other things this morning. I'm going to bring this home, my last segment here on school choice. Here's a few of your comments. Just think, homeschooling compliments parents, particularly fathers, to be spiritual leaders of their household. Yes, exactly. And like I said, homeschooling is just more natural in that you're never going to be in a situation in your adult life. Kids, they're going to get up and they're going to realize pretty quickly that they're never going to be in a situation where they're around people their age. It's very unrealistic. If you're in a corporation like State Farm, so you're working at State Farm, you might have few coworkers who are of the same age, but they'll never be likely your exact same age. Most likely they're going to be a few years older, a few years younger. You're going to have old people, young people that you're working with, and real life. And in real life, I mean, it's just not good socially, because then what you wind up having is kids who can't interact with people who are older than with them. So if you're, a young person, and you might see this in your day-to-day with your kids, right? Even with your kids, you might notice that they have a very hard time communicating with you because you are of a different age. The kids nowadays, they can't hold a conversation on the telephone. Why? Because they can't even speak face to face to someone or hold a conversation on a telephone. It is the most bizarre thing. I don't know what that is, but the kids just can't hold a conversation. And the reason why is because kids of their age, the same age, they all text or Snapchat. So having a phone call and talking on the phone for a longer period of time is foreign to them, because that's not how kids of their age interact with each other. So they're very antisocial. Public school kids, I've just noticed, of the homeschooling kids that I interact with, they are super social and they can carry out long conversations about multiple things. And they have no fear of doing it with, somebody who's older than them or somebody who's younger than them. They can have a conversation with anybody, because typically in homeschooling situations, you might have, the parents, but you'll have kids maybe of a different age. A lot of homeschooling parents, what they do is pod schooling. So kids of different ages, they kind of all come together and socialize, go to the park, and you're interacting with people of all various ages and races. And in a public school setting, you just don't get that. And they wind up being very antisocial and not being able to have a conversation with anybody outside of their age group. So let me talk about why this matters beyond policy. This is an election issue. I would say school choice is an election issue for 2026, 2028. More and more people are fleeing the public school. Student enrollment is dropping very rapidly. So more and more people are fleeing public education. It's tough because economically, it's hard not to have a high quality of life with two incomes. Okay, I'm not going to sugarcoat that. It is very tough. But I think that biblically Christians, we have to evaluate, do we want a super high quality of life, swimming pool, granite countertops, 2 cars, 2 of the nicest cars? Do we want that? Or do we want our kids to know us and to have a relationship with our children and not have them turn 18 and then them be a complete stranger? So really we have to evaluate, I think, where our priorities are as Christians. So Pritzker, if he wants to run for president, he better get ready to explain this, because this would definitely come up on the Democrat debate stage, and he better have an answer as to why he's blocking working class American parents, their children opportunities. When his daughter, she gets all kinds of opportunities. She has all kinds of opportunities, and he has the ability to provide her that, obviously being a billionaire. But if he wants to run for president, he's going to have to explain himself. So Republicans should make this the centerpiece of their campaigns. I'm just going to say this. Freedom of education, choice for parents, and an end to the teacher union tyranny. This should be Republicans' centerpiece in all of their campaigns, because this affects everybody, because most people have children, okay, and are sending them to school. So we have to fight back. If we don't fight this now, our next generation is going to turn into a woke machine, and they're going to be propagandists for the left. So we have to choose our younger generations and raise them up the way we want them to be raised. If we don't, it's going to be really bad. So let's take a moment. Let's imagine for a second Governor J.B. Pritzker's School of Excellence. Okay, welcome to Pritzker Prep. Our curriculum includes, and this is basically every public school in Illinois, our curriculum includes pronouns 101, drag queen story hour for credit, how to spot microaggressions, and let's ignore reading comprehension. That is every public school. Every public school is Pritzker prep. Okay. And remember, if you want to leave, too bad, your school voucher has been revoked because your parents, if you want to leave, too bad. The school choice voucher has been revoked because you guys want too much freedom. We don't want you to have too much freedom, and we are revoking the school voucher for you. So Donald Trump's school choice program, school choice tax credit program, we should totally opt in. I don't know. It's a no-brainer. So this is the madness we're in, and the only thing standing between your child and a state-run mind control is school choice. That's the only thing standing in between that is, hey, I get to choose where I send my kid to school and where to educate them. So President Donald Trump gave us a lifeboat. Pritzker is trying to snip that lifeboat, snip the ropes off that lifeboat. And we have to fight for freedom. Okay. We have to empower our parents. We have to follow the truth of Scripture and not let progressives rewrite Scripture in these progressive classrooms. So if you live in Illinois, call your legislator, demand that the state opt in to the federal school choice program. And I want you to know that this isn't just tax policy. Okay, this is a spiritual battle, and our children are on the front line, and Christians have to reevaluate, I think, their priorities and get these kids out of these places because they're not doing well. All right, I'm going to take another quick break, but we're going to get to Gotion, the Chinese Communist Party linked battery company Gotion. It's planned for Mantino. They're building, this is a lithium battery plant in Illinois, and they have had $536 million in taxpayer money. Okay, so that is what is allocated to them via tax credits. This is in Mantino, Illinois. And we're going to be talking about Governor J.B. Pritzker's unholy alliance with this globalist crony eco-tyrant company, Gotion, because it's much more than just building electric vehicle batteries at this point. I think that they're going to wind up building things like data center batteries, which is really, really bad for national security. So we're going to get to all of that. Smash that like button. I'll be right back. Welcome back to Conservative Cat Clips, and this is the show that gives corruption a name, a face, and a one-way ticket to exposure. I'm Kat, and today we are taking a really hard look at the unholy alliance between Michael Madigan and the unions he used like pawns in his political empire. So let's be clear. Unions in theory, sure, fair wages, nice, safe workplaces, all good. But under Madigan, unions weren't about workers. They were about votes, money, and absolute political control. Let's dig into it, shall we? Madigan built a fortress of influence using public sector unions, especially teachers, electrical workers, laborers, AFSCME. How'd he do it? Easy. He passed contracts that favored unions with big raises, ironclad job security, and pension sweeteners that simply Illinois could not afford. That's why we have the pension debt. Okay. In return, those unions pumped millions of dollars into campaign coffers, nearly $10 million from AFSCME alone, mostly directed to Madigan's machine-approved candidates. You get the contract, I get the cash, the taxpayers get screwed. This is a corruption carousel that we are on. It sounds familiar. Look at Illinois' pension crisis. Over $130 to $140 billion in pension debt and counting. Madigan and his union pals made promises that the state could never keep up just to win short-term votes. That's why we're in the pension crisis, stupid. Now we're stuck with the bill while they enjoy six-figure retirements at the age of 55. This wasn't just about money, though. Madigan used unions to intimidate the opposition. If you ran for office without a union backing, they'd swarm your district with mailers and door hangers and smear ads, and it's impossible to win if the union is backing said candidate. And they'll use the union to swarm your district, and you could never win against a Madigan machine-approved candidate. And this still goes on today in many areas of Illinois. You didn't run against Madigan, you ran against his union army, and it's still the case today. And then it's changed a little bit. Maybe it's unions and a little bit of nonprofit sector as well. in many areas of Illinois, you didn't run against Madigan or a Madigan candidate. You ran against an army. The best examples of this is in 2018, Madigan's campaign machine sent Union-backed operatives to attack Democratic reform candidates. Okay, yes, even people of his own party. Okay, if they dared question his ethics or if they dared run against one of his handpicked puppets, they would go and they'd send Union-backed operatives to go and attack Democrat reform candidates. Not quite literally, but, you know, the door hangers, the smear campaigns, all of that. And they had the money to do it because they kept getting the contracts from the government, from Madigan. And he had all the money in the world to do it because he kept getting the money from the unions. It's just this carousel, and you just keep getting screwed as a taxpayer. So don't forget about the shady deals. One union-linked lobbyist said that he felt obligated to hire Madigan's people just to get access to Springfield. That's not representation. That's racketeering with a pension plan. Okay. Now, even with Madigan under indictment and facing sentencing, he has 22 counts of corruption. Those union ties still linger. The same union leaders that backed him for decades, they're still sitting pretty. They're still funding candidates who won't touch reform with the 10-foot pole. None of these candidates want to touch reform with 10-foot pole. Nobody's really denounced Madigan's political machine. Governor J.B. Pritzker surely hasn't. And this has been Conservative Cat Clips, reminding you that unions have become political weapons when solidarity becomes code. Solidarity is code. That word is code for corruption. And when the taxpayer is left holding the bag, that's not labor, that's a scam. Okay. Michael Madigan may be out of office, but his legacy lives on with bloated budgets, crony contracts, union bosses who still pull the strings from behind closed doors. And here's your homework, my folks, in Illinois. Follow the money, follow the endorsements, follow the corruption, because it always leads back to the same machine. This has been Conservative Cat Clips. Hey, welcome back to Conservative Cat. Today we are going deep into the heart of Illinois, Manteno to be exact, and this is where something rotten is happening in Manteno, Illinois, under the mask of green energy. Let's talk about Gotion. Gotion is a Chinese Communist Party linked battery company building lithium batteries at this plant in Illinois, and they've had $536 million taxpayer dollars, okay? Tax credits courtesy of Governor J.B. Pritzker and his unholy alliance with these globalist cronies and eco-tyrants. So this isn't about clean energy. Let's stop this right now, because, and this isn't about, you know, electric vehicles even. So this is really what this is about, is compromised sovereignty, foreign land grabs, spying infrastructure, and yes, national security. This is a big national security risk, this electric vehicle battery maker. They're not actually an electric vehicle battery. They potentially are going to be making more different kinds of batteries, and I'll get to that here in just a second. But we're talking about kill switches, okay, on solar panels, kill switches on the solar panels which are connected to the grid, okay, undocumented communication chips, data center infiltration, and rail line surveillance, okay, rail line surveillance. So worst of all, they told you that this was about the environment. It's not. It's about control. So here's the bait and switch. Gotion, the factory here, it was sold to Illinois residents as a green energy hub. They're going to be making electric vehicle batteries, okay? But now, 2 production lines are reportedly churning out batteries for data centers. What? Not cars. So let me tell you what's inside those data centers, okay? The internet, cloud storage, banking systems, servers that control hospitals, governments, water treatment plants, so much more. So data centers, this is a really big deal. They're making batteries for those. And if those batteries are compromised, and we have really a reason to believe that they could be, they're not just charging servers, okay, that these aren't just, you know, batteries and charging servers, and that these batteries could be compromised and include spyware. And we have reason to believe, I mean, they're an adversary. China is an adversary of America. Okay. So they're holding they're potentially going to be holding America's critical infrastructure. This is critical infrastructure. Servers that control hospitals, governments, water treatment plants, your banking. Okay. What happens when a foreign adversary controls the lifeblood of digital America? Okay. They're holding America's critical infrastructure hostage. So let's talk about the tech. And I know your eyes might glaze over with this. Smash that like button, share this out with your friends. Your eyes might glaze over, but it's really important that we talk about the tech and how involved they are in this. So Reuters, they have a report here that the Chinese manufactured solar components in the U.S. have been found with kill switches. So when you're looking at these solar panels, when you're looking at some of these solar components, that these U.S. manufacturers or that these Chinese manufacturers are making, okay, and they're here in the United States, some of these have kill switches on them, okay? So this is designed to remotely shut down entire systems, okay, a kill switch. So we're also finding undocumented cellular radios in batteries from multiple Chinese manufacturers, okay? So this is a report from Reuters. I mean, they're implementing things like kill switches. So think about this. If we're connecting solar and wind to our grid and we're relying on some of this stuff, and then they can remotely just kill switch it, that's control of our grid, okay, our electricity, okay? And this isn't conspiracy, it's fact, backed by security experts, whistleblowers, and even an Obama-era CIA director, Leon Panetta. So look this up. He said under oath, they'll use U.S. facilities for intelligence purposes. That's just the way they operate. That's a quote from him. He said under oath, they're going to use U.S. facilities for intelligence purposes. They're going to gather intelligence. And they can include like the spyware in these batteries that they're giving to data centers. And these data centers are the lifeblood to America's digital world. I mean, let me translate this for you. You don't need to invade America when you can build a CCP factory next to a rail line, by the way, and this is interesting, it's in Manteno, and control the grid with a battery made in Manteno. Okay, if you're making the batteries and you can control the grid with these batteries, and they've got kill switches. So it gets worse. Gotion, they've purchased 390 acres of prime farmland around its factory. And this is land that they want to convert into a solar field. So that should set off sirens because the U.S. government just declared that China can't own American farmland, okay, that they must not own American farmland. The agricultural secretary under the Trump administration, Brooke Rollins, said that her department is going to move to ban and revoke Chinese land ownership, especially in critical infrastructure zones. So this is a critical infrastructure zone in Manteno, and I can't believe I didn't see this before, but I think that they strategically put this battery plant in Manteno because it's next to a major rail line. So this isn't about soybeans, okay? A lot of people will say, well, we don't want China buying up our land because we need the food and we need the farmland ourselves for the soybeans and for the corn. Really what's going on here is surveillance disguised as solar panels, espionage disguised as energy independence, and invasion without a single soldier crossing our border. I mean, that's what's going on here. China is invading the country without a single soldier. And they're doing it through technology and through spyware that they're going to be using in these batteries potentially. So let's talk about a detail that nobody's talking about. Gotion Manteno site isn't just a random industrial park. I think it was strategically chosen by Gotion because it's one of only 7 Class 1 freight rail lines. It's adjacent to one of only 7 Class 1 freight rail lines in America. So these are arteries for U.S. commerce, by the way, okay, and national defense. We move weapons, foods, chemicals, people on these rail lines. Amtrak uses this line as well, right there by Gotion. And guess what? In 2023, the U.S. State Department warned that Chinese hackers had already infiltrated these rail line systems. Okay, so China's been doing this not just in the U.S., by the way, but they've been doing it in Africa and Latin America. So if you were China and you wanted to control America from the inside, what better place to do it than build the factory right next to a rail line and near all of these internet servers? And I mean, that's what they're doing. All right, I got to take a quick break. I'm going to be right back. You're listening to Conservative Cat. Sorry about that. I had to sneeze. And it's just, I've got this weird cold that I just can't shake. And it's just so annoying because I gotta deliver this. I want you to know what's going on with Gotion. Okay, so just bear with me. Let's take a step back and look at this biblically. Okay, so my biblical segment, I like to do this where we provide you scripture. Let's look at the biblical worldview. Nehemiah Chapter 2, verse 10 tells us about leaders grieved when someone had come to seek the welfare of the people of Israel. But today it's the opposite. Our leaders are grieved when you try to defend America. So our political leaders are very upset when we try to say things like, hey, Gotion, this is not a good thing for national security. We have to defend America. And our leaders get their panties in a bunch because they would much rather reward foreign interests and punish patriots. Okay, so the foreigner who is among you shall rise. This is in Deuteronomy 28, verses 43, 44. God warns when we rebel as a nation, the foreigner who is among you shall rise. So we've got politicians who are rebelling against this nation. Foreigner among you is going to rise higher and higher above you. He shall be the head and you shall be the tail. So that's what we're seeing. Illinois is letting a foreign adversary call the shots while our people are being taxed, surveilled, and silenced. Okay, so security expert Michael Lucci, he dropped a bombshell here. He said Chinese tech is covered by the 2017 National Intelligence Law. All Chinese companies must hand over data and access to Beijing, and then they're instructed to lie about it. So there's a 2017 National Intelligence Law. So companies, when people say, oh, Gotion doesn't have any association with CCP, look at the 2017 law. It requires all Chinese companies, and all means all Chinese companies to hand over their data and give access to Beijing. So let that sink in. Gotion is Chinese, and it is, under this Chinese law, required to serve Beijing. Okay, the 2017 Chinese law. And yes, Gotion's leadership has pledged allegiance to the CCP back in 2023. So this isn't green tech, it's red tech, communist tech. And it's a Trojan horse technology wrapped in eco-rhetoric, right? And bankrolled by fools in Springfield. So let's talk betrayal. Governor J.B. Pritzker handed $536 million of Illinois taxpayer money to CCP-controlled companies. I'm going to be right back. Smash that like button. Share this out with your friends. All right, Governor J.B. Pritzker handed $536 million of Illinois taxpayer money to this CCP-controlled company, okay, after being warned by national security officials, hey, this could be potentially a risk to national security. He ignored it. He didn't care. Why? Because he's more committed to, this climate cult. And I don't know. I mean, am I going to go there and say that he is in the business of our foreign adversaries? I don't know. But it seems like he's definitely committed to this climate cult and to this global green virtue signaling more than he is committed to protecting Illinois families and farmers and our freedoms. He knew it. He did it anyway. And now we're stuck with this Chinese industrial node next to one of the busiest transportation corridors in America. And I don't think that was by coincidence. I think that they chose a site right next to a very busy rail line. And I think that they are now, it was sold to us that they were just going to do electric vehicle batteries. But guess what? Now they're doing batteries for data centers. And this is really, really dangerous. So let's not sugarcoat this. Nations will fall in a day. They will fall so quickly. And our leaders are selling off our land, and nations will fall when leaders do that. And when they rebel against their own nation, you're going to have the foreign adversary or the foreigner rise to a high position here, and they're going to be the head and you're going to be the tail. The Bible talks about this. And when you ignore the enemy at the gate, and when you give money to a hostile foreign power in exchange for green points, like, our nation is going to fall. And this has happened before. Rome fell when they allowed the barbarians inside its borders. Israel fell when they made an alliance with the pagan kings. America is falling not because we're weak, but because we're led by cowards and cronies and CCP collaborators. I mean, is Governor J.B. Pritzker a CCP collaborator? Does he care more about the Chinese government than his own American government? And we really need to look into this. Much like Tim Walz and his relationship with China and his various trips back and forth to China. I mean, at that point, you're a regular. Okay, I think it's like 30-something trips that he's taken there. We need to look into some of these governors and their ties to the Chinese Communist Party and who their allegiance is to. America or the Chinese Communist Party. So here's what we need to do. We need to demand Gotion subsidies are revoked immediately. We need to push federal lawmakers to enforce a Chinese farmland ban, which I think we already have one under the Secretary Brooke Rollins. She's really pushing that, and we need to reverse Gotion's land acquisition because, like I said, they got like 390 acres. So we need to expose every official who's supported this deal, and we need to vote them out because their allegiance is being called into question. I would call their allegiance into question if they were supportive of this Gotion deal. We need to call for a state-level ban on CCP-tied companies, a state-level ban on them operating in critical infrastructure zones. So we can do that at a federal level, but we should even go further and do it at a state level. And we need to support American companies because those are the people who are going to be manufacturing with liberty in mind and will have values that reflect our own. And Illinois doesn't need to be China's battery charger, okay? We need a state that honors freedom, not funds our enemies. All right, so I do want to wrap this up, but then we're going to get to President Donald Trump sharing, an official of President Donald Trump's administration sharing this shocking update regarding that pot farm I was talking about yesterday and the children that were found there. But folks, when we say made in China, we don't just mean the product, we mean the surveillance. Okay, when it's made in China, there's going to be surveillance tied to that. There's an agenda tied to that. So these batteries that they're making for these data centers, potentially, they could have tech in there where they're surveilling and where they're harvesting this data. And this is critical infrastructure. We're talking hospitals, we're talking internet servers, we're talking water treatment plants, we're talking governments. Okay, if they have access to those data centers through these batteries, they could put in some sort of malware to harvest data and to surveil the American people. So Mantina Gotion test, our plant is a test, and it's a test of our sovereignty, really. Are we going to stand for a country invading us with not soldiers, but with malware and tech? This is a test of our vigilance, and this is a test as to whether the Americans still have the courage to say, not on our soil. And I hope that we pass this test. And it starts by saying no to Gotion, no to CCP influence, and yes to liberty, security, and truth. All right. So we're going to be right back. I'm going to be chatting a little bit about a Trump official sharing this shocking update about a pot farm. Here we go.
Sometimes God stops you cold, not with a whisper, with a punch to the soul. Saul wasn't looking for Jesus. He was hunting Christians. He had power, position, and a mission. Then God knocked him to the dirt, a light from heaven, a voice that knew his name. Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? That moment wasn't soft. It wasn't sweet. It was a spiritual ambush. God still works like that. He steps into your mess, interrupts your pride, confronts the man you've become when you're wandered too far. Maybe you're building your own kingdom. Maybe your fists are up, fighting battles God never called you to. Or maybe you're just running hard in the wrong direction. But then comes the voice, clear, heavy, holy. Why are you persecuting me? Jesus doesn't want your behavior fixed. He wants your heart surrendered. Saul didn't get a lecture. He got a mission. Get up, go to the city. You'll be told what to do. That's the way of real manhood in the kingdom. Surrender first, then orders. You don't need every answer right now. You need to obey the voice. Follow the light. Rise up off the dirt and walk the road God lays out for you. Some roads break you to rebuild you, and that's exactly what Jesus wants. You want to train like a warrior? You need fuel like one. Patriot Pump is clean, powerful pre-workout that won't let you quit halfway. Just like the mission God gives you, it's not about the hype. It's about the grit. Fuel up, lock in, get after it.
Hey, good morning. You're listening to Conservative Cat. I appreciate you being here. Last week, I told you a little bit about this. The Supreme Leader of California, Governor Gavin Newsom, he expressed on social media that he was upset about the ICE agents who had gone in and conducted like a raid on a couple of pot farms. Okay, so there was all kinds of mainstream media lies out there that this was a strawberry farm, not a strawberry farm, and they were two pot farms. And he expressed outrage over the fact that ICE was, doing essentially what you voted for. Am I right? However, in a pathetic pursuit to affirm his stance that no human is illegal, he condoned really the exploitation of children working and possibly being trafficked at this marijuana farm. So we have learned more about this. Let's take a listen. Here we go.
Investigations. A lot of viewers will remember last week, Prairie Land Detention Facility down in Texas. We saw similar attacks against ICE enforcement officers. Again, it was highly coordinated attacks. They were wearing gear and had rifles as well. This was 10 individuals. But I will say, in those California raids, particularly disturbing the number of politicians that came out and continue to villainize and attack and demonize our ICE law enforcement officers. At that particular operation, David, at those marijuana facilities, our ICE enforcement officers found 14 children, 10 who were unaccompanied. They were likely being exploited, potential slave or forced labor, potential child and human trafficking. So this is something that is incredibly disturbing. It goes far beyond politics. And not only were there 10 unaccompanied children at that marijuana facility, but we also apprehended 361 illegal aliens with heinous rap sheets that include kidnapping, child molestation, rape, serial burglary, hit and runs. These are no people who should not be in our communities illegally, much less around innocent children, David.
Tricia, it's Alicia Acuna. Continuing on this topic in particular.
Okay, so there you have it. That was an update. She was a Trump official with DHS, and the left, they condone open borders, by the way. And they turn a blind eye to evil as they condone open borders. Okay, they turn a blind eye to the human trafficking, the forced child labor. Ensuring no human is illegal is far from compassionate. Okay, so they have this tenet, really. It's a no human is illegal. This is their philosophy. But at the same time, it allows for the worst criminals and crimes to go unchecked. So according to the Homeland Security, July 10th, 2025, federal law enforcement officers executed criminal warrants. So they obtained criminal warrants to conduct an operation at a marijuana grow site, okay, in Carpinteria and Camarillo. Okay, so there are two different sites in California. During the operation, at least 10 immigrant children were rescued. Migrant children were rescued from potential exploitation, forced labor, human trafficking. Federal officers also arrested approximately 200 illegal aliens from both sites in California. During the operation, there were 500 rioters, and they attempted to disrupt. It was weak attempts, in my opinion. Now, there was somebody who actually pulled out a gun. That was not a weak attempt to disrupt the operation. You had the pink-haired girl trying to stab the tires with the flagpole. I thought that was kind of funny. But the guy, he pulled out a gun. 4 U.S. citizens are being criminally processed for assaulting and resisting officers. The rioters damaged vehicles. There was one violent agitator who had a gun and pulled out a gun and fired shots at law enforcement officers. From what I understand, nobody was hit or hurt. The Federal Bureau of Investigations is now offering a $50,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of that violent offender. So they don't have that guy yet who pulled out that gun, and I shared that clip with you yesterday. But the individual was caught on video firing what looked like a pistol. I think it was. I mean, it's a pistol. Okay. A lot of mainstream media was like saying, oh, I don't know, maybe it wasn't a pistol. It looks like a pistol. So despite law enforcement's heroic actions to rescue these children, you have politicians like Governor Gavin Newsom out there defending the rioters and attacking our men and women in uniform. These ICE agents, Newsom claimed that this was evil and that the children were frightened over the fact that their mothers were being taken away from the fields. It's unclear if he was knowingly lying or genuinely just that ignorant. I don't know. But either way, it should disqualify him from ever running for office, especially a higher office. Like I said, I'm going to share this clip with you. This is just one of the pot plants or one of the pot farms where ICE was conducting an operation. Let's take a look.
Do not panic, do not run! Do not run! They took your mom?
They took your mom? Yeah, because she's illegal, and that's a child working at a pot farm. So the story gets crazier, though. The president of Glass House Farms, which was one of the 2 cannabis farms that had been raided by ICE and Border Patrol, that was in Camarillo. Okay, that one was in Camarillo. Donated, the president of that cannabis farm donated thousands of dollars to Democrats in California, including a $10,000 donation to Governor Gavin Newsom in 2018. Don't you just love it how they pretend like this is Donald Trump's problem and like how could he, and then they turn in a blind eye to child exploitation. And it raises the question, did they turn a blind eye to the child exploitation that was going on at this pot farm potentially? And did they do that because they received donations? Like Governor Gavin Newsom, did he turn a blind eye? Did he know child trafficking? Like, these are questions we need to start asking some of these politicians who received money from this pot farm. And I don't get it. I don't get how, you could look at this and say, oh, these ICE officers or these ICE agents are the ones who are in the wrong here, or they're the ones who are violent, or they're the bad guys here. No, they're saving children from child labor exploitation and forced labor. So let's get to this. a 700% increase in assaults on officers. Okay, can you name a police agency that has had 700% increase of violent assaults against them? There's no other agency. It's the ICE agency. Okay, this is precisely why federal ICE agents have been relying on their masks to conceal their identity, and they fear that these rioters are going to figure out who they are and dox them and their families and hurt them. They pulled out a gun on them, okay, at one of these operations, and this is exactly why Tom Homan said that when he was questioned about the ICE agents wearing these masks, and he said they have to be masked in order to protect their families and their identities. So that's exactly why he said that. So he shuts down this smug reporter here. I think this is a Politico reporter. I'm not exactly. No, I don't know. Let me double check. Sunday interview, Politico. Yep, that's it. Politico. Let's take a look at this. Here we go.
I think one of the things that's had a lot of folks up in arms is that ICE agents, unlike other law enforcement, have been masked to protect their identities. That's not something that we've really had on this scale in this country. Do you?
Well, we never had the scale of attacks on ICE. We have now up 700% attacks on ICE. Doxing against
well,
ICE
you've had
agents,
increased attacks on police officers as well in the wake of the defund the police movement too, but they haven't put masks on.
You name a police agency that has a 700% increase in assaults. Name one.
I haven't looked at that data. Yeah.
You won't find one. The attacks on ICE is unprecedented, 700% increase, and we're not even talking about the doxing of agents, their spouses, and their children. So they're wearing masks to help give them some sort of protection. But when the same people that are complaining about ICE wearing masks, have they ever said anything about BLM protesters wearing masks?
Well, I mean, that leads me to the question that, like, do you have concerns that
let me answer, though. Let me answer.
Yeah, okay.
Have they ever say anything about the mass protesters that became criminals on college campuses that threatened Jewish students and took over buildings, destroyed property? They were all wearing masks. Did anybody pass legislation saying they can't wear a mask during a protest? No. We're talking about law enforcement.
Oh, I think there are a lot of people who are upset about that. But then,
have you seen any legislation proposed to remove masks from protesters that become criminals, that take over college campus? You haven't. Look at the BLM protesters, how many lives were lost, how much property was stolen. They're all wearing masks. Did anybody propose legislation saying it's illegal to wear a mask in public while you're protesting? No, there isn't. This is attacking ICE officers. The Democrats want to vilify men and women of ICE and boards. And I said from day one, when President Trump won office and I came back and said, now the vilification starts. Right now, it's the racist ICE, the racist board for simply enforcing the law to deal with the repercussions of Biden administration's open borders, where millions of criminals and public safety threats were released in this country. So I support ICE wearing masks. They're still wearing insignia. They got HSI, ERO, or FBI, DEA, but there needs to be some level of protection because the tax is unprecedented. 700%, for God's sake. And what I want to remind people is, I was an ICE agent. These men and women at ICE, they're mothers and fathers too. They don't hang their heart on a hook every day and they come to work. They're not the beast. They're enforcing a law. They're trying to make this country safe again, and they're being vilified for it and attacked for it. And we're not going to tolerate zero tolerance on this.
Good. Zero tolerance on this. So it's unclear if this Politico reporter type woman, if she even has sympathy for some of these ICE agents who have been attacked by rioters and had guns pulled out on them. But you do the math. Probably not. She probably has no sympathy for these ICE agents who are being attacked at a 700% increase. So Borders are Tom Homan, according to the Daily Caller, clashed with Politico's Dasha Burns in a Sunday interview where she cast doubt on the necessity of ICE agents wearing masks during enforcement operations, despite increased tax. You've got Democrat Senators Cory Booker of New Jersey, Alex Padilla. We've talked about this in California, introduced this measure. Donald Trump shot down this, condemned this measure. It was a bill that would require or bar ICE agents from wearing these masks, from wearing the mask and concealing their identity. The conversation with Dash Burns said, Burns had said many people are up in arms about ICE wearing masks, saying that it's not something that we've really seen, really had on this scale in this country, where you're masking your police officers, prompting Homan to interrupt her and say that the ramping up of attacks, the 700% increase, is what has led to the masking. So, don't you just wish that like people like Cory Booker and Alex Padilla fought for you the same way they fight for foreign nationals in this country who have broken federal immigration laws and border jumped? I really wish that Dasha Burns, being that she's a reporter, I wish that she would fight for Americans. Being an American reporter, you would think that she would have the position of treating these foreign nationals who are whipping guns out on law enforcement. You'd think that she'd be more American. And that's one thing I want to shut down here. Journalists, they can be unbiased, sure. But if you're an American journalist, you have an obligation to country and you are serving your country. And if you take the position that America is bad or that our law enforcement is bad or enforcing the law is bad as a journalist, you're not a journalist and you are, I would say, treasonous. And you're trying to be adversarial with America. Okay, there's nothing wrong with being adversarial with government, but you're being adversarial with America and the tenets of America, which is, hey, law and order and sovereignty in our nation. So shame on reporters who demonize America as a concept and law and order as a concept. Tom Homan, he says, we've never had this scale of attacks on ICE that we have now. They are up 700%. Think about that. ICE agents are wearing masks. Because rioters have been targeting them and their families just for doing their jobs and enforcing the law and doing what people voted for. Okay. And we voted for Donald Trump to enforce the law and to carry out mass deportations. He was very clear on the campaign trail about that. But instead of calling out violence, the left and the media, they seem more upset with the agents who are actually doing what they were hired to do. So this really tells you where their priorities are, and they're pretending to be compassionate here. And when you pretend to be compassionate, you're really just slapping the face of the men and women on the ground who are doing whatever they can to enforce the law. And yeah, I mean, the law actually means something in this country. And if journalists are advocating for lawlessness and they are advocating on behalf of foreign nationals who border jump and then on top of that whip out guns on ICE agents, like what the hell's wrong with you? You're not even an American at this point. How could you call yourself an American journalist if you're pro whatever that is? That being said, some people are in this country. The sooner people realize that people are in this country illegally, and we have borders and we have sovereignty, something a little called our national sovereignty, and we have borders, as soon as people accept that reality and that immigrants don't have due process rights, because that is totally stupid. There's people in this country, citizens, who don't have rights that they're entitled to anymore. Felons can't own a weapon. Okay, so the whole premise that illegal immigrants have due process rights is absolutely insanity. They don't have due process rights because they're not citizens of this country. Okay, much like, for example, Brittany Griner. Right, she went over to Russia, and there they don't allow you to have it's criminal marijuana pens. I think she had like a little marijuana pen or whatever, and she was imprisoned. Okay. Here in the United States, Brittany Griner didn't have, rights to, her medical marijuana or her recreational marijuana in Russia, or due process in Russia because she's not a citizen of Russia. Okay, so they didn't have any kind of due process there for her. Same thing here in America. We don't give due process to illegal immigrants who hop the border. Okay, do we have to prove that they're illegal? Yeah. In order to deport them, sure, you can't just start rounding up citizens and start deporting them if they're not illegal. But once you confirm their illegal status and there's a legal deportation order drafted up, then you have to carry that out in order to protect our sovereignty. So we're going to be much better off if people start to realize illegal immigrants don't have due process rights. You can be in the country illegally, and that means that we can deport you. The sooner people start to realize that, the better off we're all going to be. And we got to stop pushing for open borders. All right. I want to get to one more really quickly here. I want to get to this couple of lesbians who were in a bookstore, the Barnes & Noble bookstore, and they expressed concern over the books that they found in Barnes & Noble and how they were targeted for children. So let's get to this. This is books like called The Gay BCs, Bye Bye Binary. This TikTok video has been making its rounds. Let's take a look. Here we go.
Okay, we're gay, but we're in Barnes & Nobles, and there's a kids book section, a gay kids book section, and this shit is crazy. Look at this. Okay, there's the gay BCs, right? Bye Bye Binary. Bye Bye Binary with a mohawk on a baby. Gay BCs, you're not ready. Can you hold this? Okay. What? A is for arrow and ace. B is for bi. This is crazy. We're gay, but this is crazy. What? For a baby? Okay. E is for equality. We'll take that. F is for family. Okay, we're getting better. Okay, why did it start so crazy?
Just for hope.
It got better. I is for intersex. It's pushing it. For a baby, this is pushing it.
J is for joy.
J is for joy. We'll take Tio and Tio. That looks nice. Forgot this one. K is for Kiki. Oh wait, I guess there's no gay word for M.
Okay. Hilarious. Yeah, it's pushing it for babies. Intersex. These are terms that I don't even really understand as an adult back in my day, which wasn't that long ago. Okay. This was not a thing. Gay books, gay BCs, all of that stuff. Bye Bye Binary. Yeah, this was not a thing. It's because they don't typically they don't dedicate books to the majority of the population, okay, anymore. And which is really sad. Like, it's all like a very small minority of the population. There are books catered to the very small minority set of the population, and that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. It's like, you're not going to really sell a whole lot of books, okay, first of all. Sexual orientation of most people is not much of a concern to anybody, okay, let alone children. So I don't know how they're selling these books and why they're selling these books, because you can't be that successful in selling these books. Usually you'd want to cater a book to the majority of the population, or to a lot of people who are going to read it. So this is just an odd model that authors have kind of fled to. And the fact that you got two lesbians here, they're looking at this and they're saying, wait a second, this is totally inappropriate for kids. And they said, this is pushing it. And there's zero reason to confuse children about sexual orientation when they're already really easily influenced by books. There's no reason to further confuse children. They're very easily influenced by these books. What you're going to wind up seeing is kids acting out sexually. And this has been happening even in your local area. You wouldn't be surprised to find out that there's some issues going on where children are touching children in the classroom now. And there's court dates and things like that. I won't get into too many details, but check it out. Locally, there's definitely these types of cases that have happened, probably in your local area. So according to Must Read Alaska, Gay BCs was released in 2019 by Quirk Books and authored by a gay graphic designer who wants to ensure that parents have a dialogue with their children about their sexual orientation. Hence, they can learn their alphabet letters and also be discussing their sexual attraction. Kids don't have sexual attractions. So they say C is for coming out, gay is for girl, or gay, or G is for gay, Q is for queer, T is for trans. Look, as a grown adult, I don't even understand the terms intersex or queer, or what queer means and how that is different from the word gay. It's hard for me to even grasp this, and you're expecting a child to grasp these terms fully. That being said, I don't have to tell you how absurd these books are. You know how absurd these books are. It's clear that the left knows how absurd these books are, given by these two lesbians. They hadn't a reaction to this, and they even said that's really pushing it for kids. So the left, they know that this is wrong, but the left that isn't like these two lesbians who push this stuff out there, their goal is to get the kids on the trans propaganda train. So this should never be tolerated, where we are sexualizing our children through books. This is where leftist lunatics have really gone after the younger generation, and they're doing it through these weird books and Barnes and Noble, but even in your public libraries, okay, which is even more gross because it's not a private company. I'm not saying that these books shouldn't exist, okay, but it's just like, why? And we have to really try to protect our children. So if you're bringing your kids into Barnes and Noble, you have to try to protect them and shield them from this kind of stuff, because what's going to wind up happening is if we force this down the throats of our children, they're going to wind up consuming it and acting these things out in the classroom against each other, and later in their later life, they're going to be very sexually confused, and possibly that confusion could lead to things like violence. We know this. That's why we have laws against sexual showing children pornography. You can't do that. It's against the law. Okay, we have laws against that because we know how damaging it is to children. All right. You guys have a blessed day. Bye-bye. I love you. We're going to be back again tomorrow morning, bright and early, 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. It's a daily show, Monday through Friday. Smash the subscribe button and the notification bell. I'll catch you later. Bye-bye.